It was a Tuesday in late October when the world stopped pretending to make sense. And I say that without drama. Up until then, I'd believed that life worked like a well-oiled machine. You show up, you try hard, and you get what you deserve. Then, one phone call shattered that illusion like a dropped glass of bourbon on a tile floor. Messy, loud, and impossible to undo. I was 42 years old at the time. Not young, not old. Somewhere in the no-man's land where your knees start sending little memos about your choices in high school. But your ego still thinks you can beat the neighbor's kid in a foot race. I had a decent job, a house in the suburbs with a stubborn maple tree that refused to drop its leaves on time, and a family I loved more than I knew how to say. I worked as a field engineer for a utilities company. Not glamorous, but honest. The kind of job where you end up with more stories about raccoons in crawl spaces than any grown man should. I liked it, mostly. I liked the rhythm of it. The early mornings, the thermos coffee, the hum of the truck's heater. I liked coming home dirty and tired to my wife, June, and our daughter, Lila. Lila was 12 back then. Sharp as a tack and just starting to get that wide-eyed look teenagers get when they realize the world's a bit more complicated than cartoons had led them to believe. She had her mother's steady gaze and my bad habit of tapping pencils during homework. I never told her how much I saw of myself in her. Maybe because I wasn't always sure that was a good thing. June was the best part of me, plain and simple. She had this way of talking to people that made you forget what you were mad about. She could silence a room with a whisper, and not because she was loud, but because she meant every word she said. We met in college. She was studying to be a nurse. I was bouncing between majors like a confused pinball. She grounded me, still did. We were doing fine. Not rich, not struggling. Lila's braces were paid off. We'd almost finished paying off the kitchen remodel, too, though I still think the granite countertops were her way of winning an argument I didn't know we were having. But that Tuesday, it changed everything. It was around 3:45 p.m. I was at a site out near Haviland Creek, checking a gas line with one of the new hires, a quiet kid named Terrence. The sky had that washed-out look autumn gets when it forgets how to be beautiful. We were just about to wrap up when my phone buzzed. It was the school. I remember laughing as I picked it up. "Probably Lila forgot her lunch again," I said to Terrence. He gave me one of those polite rookie laughs. The kind that says, "I don't get the joke, but I know I'm supposed to." But it wasn't about a lunchbox. The voice on the line was tight, like a rope pulled too hard. It was the school counselor, Mrs. Hanley. Said there'd been an incident. Lila had collapsed during gym class. They couldn't wake her. An ambulance was on the way. I don't remember the drive to the hospital. I remember my knuckles turning white on the steering wheel. I remember the taste of copper in my mouth, like fear had been sitting in there all along and finally melted into my tongue. When I got to County General, June was already there. Her face was ashen. Her hands fluttering around a cup of hospital coffee she didn't seem to know she was holding. She looked up at me, and for the first time since I'd known her, her eyes had no answers in them. The nurse at the desk told us Lila was stable, but unconscious. They didn't know why. Tests were being run. It could be a seizure, they said, or maybe a heart irregularity. But the way they spoke, too calm, too measured, it felt like they were reading lines off a script they didn't believe in. I sat by Lila's bed that night, watching the rise and fall of her chest, listening to the soft beep of the heart monitor. She looked like she was just asleep, except for the faint line of worry that had crept into her brow. Even in unconsciousness, my little girl looked concerned. That haunted me more than anything. That night, I prayed like a man lost in a desert. Not because I suddenly found religion, I'd always been one of those Sunday morning skeptics, but because there was nothing else to do. I whispered to the ceiling, to God, to fate, to anyone listening, "Please, I'll take it. Whatever it is, give it to me." I didn't know what I was offering. I didn't care. By morning, the tests had started coming back. No heart defects, no signs of trauma, no epilepsy, no tumors, and still no response. Lila just lay there, breathing, dreaming, not waking up. They called it idiopathic, which is the fancy way of saying, "We have no damn clue." That word became a ghost in the hospital halls, following us wherever we went. But I knew something had changed, not just in Lila, but in me. A kind of fog had rolled in around my sense of the world. My certainties were slipping. And in that quiet, in that long waiting, something began to whisper at the edges of my mind. Something I hadn't thought about in years. Something I'd buried. Sitting there by her bedside, holding her limp hand, I suddenly remembered a summer day from my own childhood, a moment I hadn't thought of in decades. A light in the woods. A voice that wasn't quite a voice. And the strange feeling I'd had even then that something was watching out for me or maybe watching me. And as that memory returned, something deep in me stirred. Like maybe what was happening to Lila wasn't the start of something but the continuation of something I'd run from long ago. When I was 9 years old, I saw something I never could explain. It was the summer of '83. My folks had taken us to a little cabin up in the Catskills, nothing fancy, just a splintery 2-bedroom with a screen door that always slammed a second after you walked through it. The place sat near a stretch of woods that seemed to go on forever. I spent most of that summer pretending to be a frontiersman, carving sticks, throwing rocks, and getting poison ivy in places I wouldn't mention in polite company. There was one day that stood out though. It was hot, heavy with the kind of air that makes your shirt stick to your back. I remember waking up before everyone else and deciding to sneak out for an early morning expedition. Just me, my red rubber boots, and a peanut butter sandwich I'd snuck from the kitchen. I told no one where I was going, just disappeared into the trees like a ghost. I walked deeper than I ever had before. Past the hollow log with the old wasp's nest. Past the creek that ran like a secret down a shallow ravine. Until the woods got quieter, too quiet. That's when I saw it. There was a clearing. In the middle of it, a strange shimmer in the air like the heat off asphalt, except cooler somehow. More like silver than mirage. It didn't make a sound. Just floated there, about chest height to me at the time. I remember my breath catching in my throat. Then, a sensation. A pressure in my chest like someone had gently placed their hand right over my heart. Not threatening. Not even painful. Just there. Present. It lasted maybe 10 seconds. Then the shimmer vanished, blinked out like a light turned off. And I was alone again. I never told anyone about it. Not my parents, not my brother, not even June when we started dating. What would I have said? Hey, remember when we were kids and aliens weren't cool yet? I saw one in the woods. No thanks. But there in that hospital room all those years later, holding Lila's hand, that memory slammed back into me like it had just happened. I could still feel that hand on my chest. Still remember the silence of that clearing, the way the world held its breath. And it wasn't just a memory. It was a feeling. A certainty I couldn't explain. Something was happening to Lila that echoed that day. I couldn't say how, and I knew I'd sound like a lunatic if I tried. But somewhere beneath my bones I knew it was connected. Of course, I didn't tell June about it. Not yet. She was running on fumes, talking to doctors, calling her sister to help with the house, sitting beside Lila and whispering lullabies like she had when she was little. I didn't want to add this to her list of things to worry about. Still, it festered in me. That feeling. That light in the woods. That hand. By day 3 in the hospital, something strange happened. I was sitting alone in the waiting room late at night. The fluorescent lights hummed like distant bees and the coffee tasted like regret. I'd nodded off when a janitor passed by, a man I'd never seen before. He was older, maybe in his 60s. Clean uniform. Silver beard. Kind eyes. He looked at me and said, "She's not lost. She's listening." I blinked, confused. "I'm sorry, what?" He smiled. "Your daughter. She's listening for something. Don't try to pull her back too hard. She'll come when it's time." Then he pushed his mop bucket down the hall and vanished around the corner. I waited a minute, then stood up and went to look for him. No sign. I asked the nurse if there was an older janitor working that shift. She shook her head. Said the only janitor that night was a young guy named Sam. I should have been freaked out. But I wasn't. I felt calmed. Like I'd been given a rope in the dark. When I got back to Lila's room, I sat down beside her and, on a strange impulse, whispered, "Are you listening, kiddo?" No response, of course. But her fingers twitched. Just a little. That was the first movement we'd seen. The doctors brushed it off. Could be a nerve spasm, they said. But I didn't think so. I felt it. The same way I'd felt that presence in the woods. The next night, I had a dream, except it didn't feel like a dream. It felt more real than the hospital room. I was in that same clearing from my childhood, except I wasn't 9 anymore. I was me, as I was now. And standing at the edge of the trees, half shadow, half light, was Lila. She looked straight at me and said, clear as day, "Dad, I saw the light too." I woke up gasping, sweat-drenched, heart pounding. The clock read 3:33 a.m. I shot up from the hospital cot, stumbling toward her bed. Still unconscious. But I swear on my life that she was crying. A single tear ran down her cheek. I wiped it away with shaking fingers. June didn't believe the dream meant anything. I told her the next morning, half expecting her to laugh. She didn't. But she didn't say much either. Just nodded, squeezed my hand, and whispered, "We just need her to come back. Whatever it takes." That's the thing about crisis, it either pulls you apart or stitches you tighter than ever. And we were being sewn together by threads we didn't understand. A few days later, I started digging. Not metaphorically. I mean literally. I drove back to the Catskills. Took a weekend off from the hospital, if you can call leaving your unconscious daughter a break. I didn't tell June where I was going, just said I needed to clear my head. I felt guilty about that, but something was pulling me there, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the answers lay in that clearing. I hadn't been back in over 30 years. The cabin was gone, replaced by a new development. But the woods behind it? Still there. Older now? Overgrown. But still. I hiked out before sunrise, flashlight in hand. I was running on intuition and maybe a little desperation. I don't know how I found the spot. Muscle memory, maybe? Or something deeper. But I found it. The clearing. Overgrown now, yes, but still oddly quiet. Still hollowed out in that same unnatural circle. And when I stepped into it, my chest thudded. That pressure again. That same hand. And there right in the middle was something I'd never noticed as a kid. A stone. About the size of a loaf of bread buried in moss. And etched into it, faint but unmistakable, was a symbol I'd never seen before. A spiral inside a triangle, surrounded by tiny notches, almost like a child's counting marks. I don't know why I did what I did next. I sat down, cross-legged, in the cold grass. And I whispered, "If you're listening, she is too. Help her." I stayed there until the sun rose. When I got back to the car, there was a message on my phone from June. Just one line. She opened her eyes. When I first walked into Lila's room and saw her eyes open, I didn't feel joy, not at first. I felt something much stranger, hesitation. She was awake, yes, but not entirely here. She looked at me like someone who spent too long underwater, like she was trying to remember what breathing felt like. Her pupils were huge, black pools. And though she blinked and tracked me across the room, her face didn't register recognition until I spoke. "Hey, kiddo," I whispered. "You found your way back." That's when she smiled. Small, but real. And I swear to you, it broke something loose in my chest. I sat down beside her and let my hand wrap around hers. Warm. Soft. Real. But even as the relief surged in me like a second heartbeat, I could tell she hadn't come back alone. June was down in the cafeteria. She came sprinting back up when I called. We cried. All three of us. Or maybe it was just June and me. We never asked Lila if tears came to her then. She was quiet. Still weak. The doctors were baffled but cautiously optimistic. No signs of trauma, no lingering effects. It was like she just slept. They called it spontaneous recovery. Another fancy term for, we don't know what happened but we're glad it's over. But I wasn't sure it was over. The first time I noticed it was the third day after she woke up. We were home by then, set up with soft blankets and bowls of soup like the world had forgiven itself. I walked past her room late at night and saw a soft light under the door. I assumed she was watching TV, but when I pushed the door open, the screen was black. She was sitting cross-legged on the bed, eyes closed, and her fingertips were glowing. Not bright, just faintly. Like the last embers of a campfire. I didn't say anything. I just watched, frozen. After a few seconds, the glow faded and she opened her eyes slowly, like she knew I was there the whole time. "Daddy," she said softly. "It's okay. They're teaching me." I stepped into the room. "Who is?" She smiled again. Not the little smirk she used to give me when she wanted ice cream. This was something older. Sadder. Wiser. The ones in the light. That's when I knew, without any doubt, that the thing I saw as a boy, the shimmer in the woods, wasn't just some strange weather trick. It was them. And now they were talking to my daughter. I wish I could tell you I handled it with grace. That I calmly listened, took notes, became a man of vision and acceptance. But no, I panicked. I paced the hallway, heart racing. I whispered into the sink like a lunatic. I even drove out to the church and sat in the back pew for an hour, just staring at the cross, asking it to blink, move, do something. It didn't. When I came back, Lila was in the living room with June, coloring like nothing had changed. And maybe that's what unsettled me most, how ordinary it all seemed on the surface. But it wasn't. It really wasn't. Over the next few weeks, little things kept happening. Lila started knowing things she shouldn't. She'd say things like, "Don't worry about the check, Mom, it cleared," before June had even opened the mail. Or, "That dog's going to be okay," when we saw an injured stray being loaded into a vet's van, and sure enough, we got word the next day from the local shelter that it had recovered. And then there were the dreams. I started having them again. Always the same clearing. Always the same light. But now, Lila was inside the light. Not just looking at it, but part of it. And she'd speak in voices that weren't quite hers. Sometimes one, sometimes many, layered over each other like harmonies. One night I asked in the dream, "What do you want from her?" The voice replied, "She's not ours. She is between. She remembers what most forget." When I woke, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, not in a paranoid way, but like someone was waiting. Like something had invested in us and was seeing how the bet would turn out. I started researching things I'd once laughed off. Sacred geometry. Electromagnetic frequencies in forest clearings. Accounts of near-death experiences in children. The overlap between myth and quantum mechanics. I even ordered a book off the internet written by some bearded guy living in Iceland who claimed his daughter could see the weavers behind the veil. I read it cover to cover. And through it all, Lila kept smiling. Kept growing stronger. And kept changing. She still loved her cereal. Still rolled her eyes when I made dad jokes. But now she could walk into a room and tell who'd had a bad day. She touched a neighbor's arm once and whispered, "Your brother forgives you," and the woman burst into tears. It wasn't magic. It was presence. Stillness. As if she'd touched something infinite and carried a piece of it back with her. June was quiet about it. She believed, I think, but in a way that didn't require explanation. She saw the light in our daughter's face and decided that was enough. But I couldn't let it be enough. I needed to know. One night, I asked Lila directly. We were sitting outside on the porch. Fireflies flickering. The air smelled like warm pine. "What happened when you were gone?" I asked. "Where did you go?" She looked up at the stars for a long time before she answered. "I was with them. But not in a place. More like inside a song. Except the song was alive. And it showed me things. Who we were. Who we'll be. The thread that connects everything." I swallowed hard. "And why you?" She shrugged. "Maybe because you saw them too. Maybe because you remembered." Then she touched my hand. "You remembered the light, Daddy? That means it never really left you." That's when I realized something that shook me to my core. Whatever touched her didn't start with her. It started with me. And whatever I'd seen in that clearing all those years ago, it had been waiting. Patient. Watching my life unfold. And now it had come full circle, not to end something but to begin it. A week later we had another visitor. A man in a gray coat. Early 50s. Soft-spoken. Said he was from a small research institute interested in anomalous consciousness. I didn't like the way he smiled, like he was cataloging us. He'd heard about Lila through an internal channel. Asked if she'd be willing to come in for some non-invasive observation. EEGs. Dream interviews. Nothing scary, he promised. June told him to get off our porch. But I saw it in his eyes, he wasn't going to give up. The world was starting to take notice. And I wasn't sure we were ready for what that meant. People always talk about miracles like they're loud. Fireworks. Revelations. Angels trumpeting in the sky. But the truth? Miracles are quiet. They arrive like dew, soft, unnoticed by most, shimmering only if the light hits them just right. That's what Lila became in the weeks after she woke. A quiet miracle. Our home was the same creaky step in the hallway, same leaky faucet in the kitchen, but everything felt more awake, like the house itself was holding its breath. Still, the outside world didn't sleep. After the man in the gray coat came, I started noticing things. A car parked across the street a little too often. Phone calls that rang once, then stopped. Mail showing up late or not at all. June told me I was seeing shadows that weren't there. Maybe she was right. But after what we'd lived through, I trusted my gut more than I trusted reason. One night, after Lila was asleep, I pulled down the attic ladder and dug out the old trunk where I kept the pieces of my younger, dumber self. Camp gear, high school yearbooks, a box of letters I never mailed. At the bottom, I found the notebook. I hadn't even remembered keeping it. It was from the summer I'd seen the light. Scribbled drawings of the clearing, the shimmer. A page where I'd written the word hello about 20 times, getting smaller with each line. And on the inside cover, a phrase I must have heard or imagined. But either way, it chilled me now. Some lights aren't meant to guide you home. They show you what you left behind. I sat there, notebook in my lap, trying to reconcile the boy I'd been with the father I'd become. I wondered if I'd ever really left that clearing. If part of me had stayed there, watching the rest of my life unfold like a movie, waiting for the moment I'd return. And now that moment was closer than ever. The night before everything changed for good, Lila came into our room. She wasn't crying, wasn't scared, just calm, steady. She looked at me and said, "They're going to ask me soon whether I want to stay here or go with them. And I don't think I'm supposed to decide alone." That was when I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I didn't sleep that night, just watched her from the hallway as she lay curled under her blankets, lit by the soft flicker of her nightlight. One she didn't seem to need anymore. When morning came, we did what families do when they're trying to pretend they still have normal days. We made pancakes. I burnt one. June teased me about it. Lila laughed, but that faraway look never left her eyes. That afternoon, I called the man in the gray coat. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted answers. Maybe I wanted to confront the thing I couldn't name. But he picked up on the first ring. "I was wondering when you'd be ready to talk," he said. His name was Dr. Kepler. Worked for a research program called the Ensemble Institute, some private foundation with a lot of long titles and no clear mission. He claimed they didn't want to take Lila away, just talk, observe, protect if needed. But I heard the hunger under his voice, like he'd waited years for something like this, like she was a missing piece in some ancient puzzle. "She's only a child," I said. "No," he replied gently. "She was. But she's something else now." I didn't like that. Not one bit. He offered to meet in person. Neutral ground. A park in the next town over. I agreed on the condition that Lila wasn't there. He asked me to bring something from the site of contact, the clearing. So I did. I dug up the stone. Felt wrong to touch it again, like pulling a key from a door that should stay closed. But I wrapped it in a cloth and brought it to the meeting. He was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench beneath an old elm, feeding bits of muffin to birds that didn't fly away. He looked at the stone with a reverence I hadn't expected. "This confirms it," he murmured. "These have been found in 12 locations across the globe, always near children who come back changed." I asked what it was. He just said, "A message and a marker." He spoke for a while after that, told me about the others. Children who drowned and revived, who'd survived car crashes, comas, lightning strikes. Children who came back and painted stars they'd never studied, who spoke languages they'd never heard, who hummed harmonies no human ear had taught them. And he said something else. "They're not chosen because they're special. They become special because they're chosen. The light, it looks for the ones who still remember how to wonder." I left before he finished. I didn't like the way he looked at me when he said, "Remember," like he was counting on me too. That night, Lila came to me again. This time in my dream. We were back in the clearing. But it wasn't just a memory now. It was alive, like the forest was breathing around us. The shimmer hung in the air, and inside it, figures moved. Tall, gentle, their faces impossible to focus on. And Lila stood between them. "They asked," she said. "What did you tell them?" I said I'd ask you first. My throat tightened. "And what do you want, baby?" She looked at me, eyes wide. Not with fear, but with love so big it made my knees weak. "I want to stay," she whispered. "But I also want to know what's out there. What I touched. What touched me." That's when I realized this wasn't about letting go. It wasn't about protecting her from the world. It was about recognizing the truth. She'd already stepped into something larger than anything I could contain. And the only choice I had left was whether to stand in the way or stand beside her. I woke up with her sitting at the foot of my bed. She looked small again, just a kid in an oversized sweatshirt. But when she spoke, her voice carried something ancient. "I don't have to go now," she said. "They'll wait, but not forever." I nodded, unsure if I was agreeing or just holding on. "Then we wait too," I said. "And when the time comes, we decide together." She smiled. "Okay, Daddy." I've never been more proud, or more terrified, because deep down I knew the truth. This wasn't the end. It was just the pause before something bigger than any of us. It's been 5 years since the night Lila asked me that question. She's 17 now. Taller than her mother with that same gaze that could knock the wind out of you, not because it's harsh, but because it sees. She still taps her pencil when she's thinking. Still laughs too hard at dumb puns. Still watches the stars like they're whispering secrets. We never talked again about the light in the way we did that year, not directly. There's no need. It's not something we need to explain anymore. It's just part of us now, like the way you don't question your own shadow. You just live alongside it. We moved shortly after everything settled. Not far. Just enough to feel like a new chapter. I took a different job, more time at home, less crawling under houses and climbing poles. June started painting again, which she hadn't done in years. And Lila, well, she listens more than she speaks now. There are still little things that happen. Moments. Not big, showy miracles, but the quiet kind. Once, a neighbor's baby stopped breathing for 20 seconds while waiting for an ambulance. Lila touched the child's foot gently and whispered something under her breath. The baby coughed and wailed to life. No one asked questions. They don't anymore. I used to wonder if what touched her and me all those years ago was something divine, or alien, or maybe something that doesn't fit into any word we've yet invented. Now I think the answer is simpler. Maybe we just brush up against truth sometimes. The kind that doesn't fit in books or sermons. The kind that changes your shape quietly like a river carving a canyon. And sometimes on nights when the sky is very clear and the wind is very still, I go out to the woods behind our new house. Not because I'm expecting anything. Not because I'm chasing a miracle. But because every now and then when I close my eyes, I feel it again. That soft hand on my chest. And I hear her voice, not as she is now, but as she was then, 12 years old and infinite. Whispering. Some lights don't lead you back. They show you who you really are. I think that's what this was all about. Not answers. Not powers. Just remembrance. Of what we are beneath the noise. Of how much love is stitched into the fabric of us if we're quiet enough to feel it. And of how sometimes the people we protect end up saving us in return. Lila still hasn't made her final choice, if there's a choice to make. Maybe the light will call her again. Maybe not. But if it does and she goes, I won't stop her. I'll stand in the clearing where it all began. I'll place the stone back in the moss. And I'll whisper. Go, baby girl. Show them the song you heard. Because love, I've learned, isn't just holding on. Sometimes it's knowing when to let the light pass through.